Two Karen sisters thought they could get away with anything. They marched their kids into my backyard like they owned the place, splashing in my pool as if I had built it for their personal use. At first I thought I was imagining it. Couldn't possibly be that bold, right? But no, there they were, with their towels draped over my chairs, their kids shrieking with laughter while their mothers lounged on floats they hadn't asked to borrow. The nerve sent shockwaves through me. This wasn't just rude, it was an invasion. My backyard, my pool, my rules. Yet these women carried themselves like queens who could take whatever they wanted. I felt my blood boil. Instead of storming, down in rage, I did something far more powerful. I went to the gate, locked it tight, and walked up onto my deck. From above, I folded my arms and watched them like a king overlooking unwanted trespassers. Their faces shifted the moment they realized the gate was shut, no way out without coming through me. The panic that replaced their smug smiles was priceless. I wasn't just protecting my property, I was reclaiming my dignity. The morning had started peacefully. The sun was bright, the air smelled of fresh grass, and my backyard looked exactly the way I liked it, neat.com, and private. Saturdays were my reset days. I had just finished mowing the lawn, trimmed the hedges, and poured myself a tall glass of iced tea. The pool sparkled under the sunlight, its blue water inviting but still untouched. I always liked the sight of it before anyone got in, like a painting I had worked hard to maintain. It was my pride, my quiet escape from the noise of the world. I set the glass down on the deck railing and stretched my arms, feeling the sweat on my shirt from the yard work. That was when I heard the distinct sound of splashing water. At first, I brushed it off. Birds sometimes skimmed across the pool, or a breeze could ripple the surface, but this sound was too heavy, too rhythmic. Then came the laughter. Not just laughter, but children's squeals, loud and piercing, bouncing off the fence like they belonged there. My body stiffened. I stepped toward the edge of the deck, peering around the corner, and what I saw stopped me cold. Two women, unmistakable with their loud voices and smug energy, sat by the poolside chairs that I had bought just last month. Their towels, brightly colored and glaring against the neutral tones of my yard, were spread across the cushions as if they owned them. Meanwhile, for kids to each, I guessed were already diving into the pool, splashing water everywhere, sending waves rolling over the tiles. For a moment, I thought my brain was playing tricks. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but the image stayed. They weren't ghosts. They weren't strangers either. I knew them, everyone in the neighborhood did. The infamous sisters, two women whose reputations for entitlement and arrogance had already earned them the nickname the Karens of the block. They were always complaining about something, always pushing boundaries that weren't theirs to push. And now, unbelievably, they were in my yard, using my pool. I froze, caught between disbelief and anger. How did they even get in? The gate to my backyard was always closed. Then I noticed wide open, swinging slightly in the breeze. They hadn't just wandered in, they had marched in. One of the sisters noticed me then, raising her hand in a casual wave like we were old friends. "Oh, hey," she called out, smiling in a way that wasn't friendly but dismissive, like she was granting me permission to stand in my own yard. "We thought we'd let the kids cool off. It's such a hot day." I couldn't even form words at first. My mouth opened, then shut again. The audacity was staggering. They didn't ask, didn't knock, didn't even leave a note. They had decided that my property was theirs to use simply because they wanted to. My iced tea sat sweating on the deck, railing, forgotten, as my fists tightened at my sides. The children continued splashing, screaming with delight, completely unaware that they were trespassing. One of the boys climbed onto the inflatable float I kept tied up by the steps, bouncing on it like it was a trampoline. A girl grabbed the pool noodles, stacked neatly in a corner, tossing them to the others. My pool toys, my chairs, my water roll, being devoured in front of me, and I was supposed to just smile and let it happen. My first instinct was to storm down there, raise my voice, and kick them out. But I knew the sisters. They thrived on drama. They'd twist the story, make me out to be the unreasonable neighbor yelling at kids. They'd weaponize the chaos, turn it into gossip, and suddenly I would be the villain. So instead, I stood still and silent, letting the scene burn into my memory. The sun reflected off the water, making their smug faces almost shine with arrogance. The sound of their laughter grated against my ears, a reminder that they felt untouchable. My pulse hammered in my chest, and yet I didn't move. Inside, though, something began to shift. I wasn't just angry, I was insulted. They hadn't stolen an object, they had stolen respect. My backyard was my sanctuary, the one place I didn't have to share or explain myself, and they had barged in like conquerors, planting their flags in what was mine. The sister in the oversized sunglasses leaned back in my lounge chair and sighed dramatically. "This pool is just perfect," she said to her sister, loud enough for me to hear. "So much nicer than the public one. I'm glad we came over, as if they had been invited, as if this was a planned neighborhood gathering. Instead of an invasion, I turned away and walked back toward the deck railing, gripping it so tightly the wood dug into my palms. My mind raced through possible responses. Should I call the police? Too extreme, I thought. Should I confront them? Too easy for them to spin against me. No, I needed something sharper, something that made it clear this wasn't just wrong, it was unforgettable. And then, the idea slid into my head, smooth and satisfying. The gate, if they could walk in so easily, maybe leaving wasn't going to be so simple. My lips curled into a slow, tight smile as I glanced back at the open gate. They hadn't even bothered to close it behind them. Perfect. I strolled across the deck casual as if I were going to fetch another drink. But instead I made my way toward the side gate. The laughter continued behind me, carefree and oblivious. I reached the gate, swung it shut with deliberate force, and clicked the lock into place. The sound was small, just a metal clasp catching, but in that instant, it echoed like thunder in my mind. The line had been drawn. When I turned back, the sisters hadn't noticed yet. They were too busy gossiping and adjusting their sunglasses while the kids cannonballed into the water. I walked calmly back up onto the deck, climbed the steps, and leaned against the railing with my arms folded. From there, I had the perfect view. My pool below, my trespassers trapped inside, and me above them, silent. Watching it wasn't confrontation, not yet, it was patience. And patience, I realized, could be far more powerful than anger. From the deck, I leaned casually against the railing, looking down at the scene below like a silent judge. The laughter and splashing continued for a while, the kids oblivious to anything beyond their little game. The two sisters, however, began to notice me lingering. Their eyes flicked upward every few minutes, their forced smiles trying to cover what I could tell was a growing discomfort. They were used to being the ones in control, to pushing their way through situations until people gave up and let them win. But this time, I wasn't saying a word, and silence is often louder than shouting. The first to crack was the one with the large sunglasses. Her name was Rachel, though everyone in the neighborhood knew her as Karen number 1. She adjusted herself on my lounge chair, her movements fidgety now instead of relaxed. "Hey," she called up, forcing a light laugh. "Do you mind if the kids play a little longer? They're having such a good time." Her tone grated on me. It wasn't a question. It was more like a demand disguised as courtesy. She expected me to nod and shrugged, to play the role of the quiet neighbor who didn't want to cause trouble. I didn't answer. I only took a slow sip from my glass of iced tea, letting the ice clink against the rim as I stared down at them. The other sister, Melissa Karen number 2, noticed the gate then. She got up, smoothing out her swimsuit cover, and strolled toward it, maybe intending to grab something from their car or just reassure herself that their exit was open. When she tugged at the latch, the sound carried clearly to where I stood. Click, click. It didn't budge. She frowned, tried again, rattled it harder. Then she turned back toward her sister, her voice carrying a sharp edge. "Did you lock this?" she asked. Rachel frowned, lifting her sunglasses. "What do you mean? It's locked." Melissa shook the gate hard enough to make the metal rattle. The kids paused their play for the first time, glancing over with curiosity. "We can't get out." I almost smiled, but I kept my face blank. My silence stretched out like a shadow over the pool. Rachel looked up at me again, this time her smile thin as strained. "Hey," she called, her voice louder. "Could you unlock this for us? The kids might get tired soon and we should probably head back for lunch." It was the first hint of nerves, wrapped in a casual excuse they weren't ready to admit. Guilt, not yet. They just wanted me to go along with their version of the story, polite neighbors who borrowed something without asking. No harm done. I let the moment hang. Then, finally, I spoke, my voice calm and deliberate. "You let yourselves in without asking. Now you can wait until I decide you've had enough." Their jaws dropped in unison. For a second, they didn't even react. They weren't used to people drawing lines, let alone pushing back. Melissa was the first to sputter. "Excuse me, this is ridiculous. We're neighbors. Neighbors share. You can't just lock us in like we're criminals." The word hung in the air, and I knew she regretted saying it. Because the truth was, they were trespassers. They had broken into my yard, used my belongings, and acted like it was theirs. If anyone was in the wrong here, it was them. Rachel tried a different tactic. She stood, smoothing her wet hair back, and put on her best diplomatic smile. "Look, we didn't think you'd mind. It's such a hot day, and the public pool is crowded. We just wanted to give the kids a break. We'll only stay a little while longer." Her words were carefully chosen, but they carried the same poison of entitlement. "We didn't think you'd mind." As if my feelings didn't matter. As if I didn't deserve the basic respect of being asked. "You thought wrong," I said simply. Melissa stomped toward the gate again, shaking it so violently that the kids whined. "You can't do this. You can't hold us hostage." "Hostage?" I raised an eyebrow, letting a touch of amusement into my tone. "Funny I didn't invite you in, yet here you are. If you want to call the police, go ahead. I'm sure they'll be very interested to hear how you ended up inside my locked backyard." That shut her up. Her face flushed red, the kind of angry flush that comes from realizing you don't have the power you thought you did. Rachel, sensing the danger of escalating further, tried to corral the kids out of the pool. "All right, everyone out," she said, her voice tight. "Let's dry off. But kids don't understand the weight of adult tension. They whined, begged to stay in, splashed harder. One of them shouted, "But this is the best pool ever." Another climbed back onto the float, oblivious to his mother's glare. The sisters tried to coax them, but the louder they raised their voices, the more obvious their loss of control became. I leaned against the railing, letting the scene unfold like theater. Every second that passed made them smaller, less powerful. Their dominance cracked like glass, replaced by frantic whispers and sharp gestures. Finally, Rachel looked back up at me, her sunglasses off now, her eyes pleading. "Please," she said, her voice lower, the false cheer gone. "Just unlock the gate, we'll leave." Her tone had shifted completely. The arrogance had drained away, leaving something closer to desperation. That was the moment I had been waiting for. Respect not handed to me, but taken back by force. Still, I wasn't ready to give in. You don't get to break into someone's property, use it like it's yours, and then walk away like nothing happened. Not without understanding the line you crossed. Melissa muttered something under her breath, but Rachel silenced her. With a sharp look, the sisters gathered their children, wrapping them in towels, trying to make the scene look less humiliating than it was. But there was no hiding it. From where I stood, they looked small, trapped, caught in their own arrogance. The kids, sensing the shift, went quiet. No more laughter, no more splashing. Just the sound of water dripping from their hair onto the pavement, the air heavy with embarrassment. I didn't move from the deck. I let them stew in the weight of their choices. The silence stretched on, broken only by the occasional rustle of a towel or the squeak of wet feet on the stone tiles. Every second was deliberate, a lesson they wouldn't forget. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The air felt heavier now, charged with something that made the kids uneasy and their mothers visibly unsettled. I stayed on the deck, leaning into the railing like a king on his throne, while the two sisters fussed nervously by the pool's edge. The earlier laughter was gone. All that remained was the faint dripping of water off the children's skin and the creak of the locked gate every time. Melissa gave it another angry rattle. "Unbelievable," she muttered, yanking at the latch, as if sheer force would undo it. "He can't just keep us here. This is crazy." Rachel shushed her sharply. "Stop. Don't make it worse." She glanced up at me, trying again with a softer approach. "Look, I think there's been a misunderstanding." Her voice was honeyed now, a poor disguise for panic. "We really didn't mean any harm. The kids were restless, and we thought it would be fine for just a little while. It's not like we destroyed anything." Her words dripped with entitlement, though she probably thought they sounded reasonable. I didn't reply. Instead, I held her gaze, silent, unyielding. My lack of response made her fidget, pulling her towel tighter around her shoulders as if it were a shield. Melissa, less patient, threw her hands into the air. "Why are you just standing there? What kind of person locks their neighbors in their own yard? You think this makes you look good? You look like a lunatic." That broke my silence. A lunatic. My voice was calm, steady, but it carried across the yard like a blade. "Funny, I'm not the one who broke into someone else's property, used their things without asking, and then acted like it was mine. Tell me, which of us looks more unhinged?" Melissa opened her mouth to fire back, but the words stuck. Even she knew there was no defense for what they had done. She spun away from me with a frustrated growl, muttering curses under her breath while Rachel shot me a pleading look. "Please," Rachel said again, her voice breaking in the middle. "We'll leave, just let us out." But I wasn't ready to unlock the gate yet. I wanted the lesson to stick not just for them, but for anyone else who might ever think my yard was theirs to take. "You'll leave when I decide," I said. "Until then, you're going to think about what you've done." The kids, confused by the rising tension, began to whimper. One of the younger boys tugged at Melissa's arm. "Mom, I'm cold. I want to go home." His teeth chattered as he wrapped the towel around himself tighter. The other children echoed his complaints, their high voices piercing through the uneasy silence. Melissa crouched down to comfort him, but her frustration bled through. "We'll go soon," she whispered, though her tone was sharp, angry. Then, she stood and glared up at me again. "You're scaring them," she accused, pointing a finger like a weapon. I tilted my head slightly. "No, you scared them when you taught them it's okay to take things that don't belong to you. I'm just showing them the consequences." That shut her up again. For a while, no one spoke. The children sat huddled in their towels, sniffling softly, while the sisters whispered furiously to one another. I caught fragments of their words. "Call the police. He can't do this. We'll sue." But the desperation in their tones betrayed them. They knew the truth. If the police showed up, they'd have to admit how they got here, and that story wouldn't end in their favor. Minutes passed like hours. The sun beat down on them, no longer friendly but oppressive. Their earlier smugness was gone, replaced with something fragile, brittle. They weren't queens anymore, they were just two entitled women caught red-handed. Finally, Melissa snapped. She stormed back to the gate, pounding on it with her fist. "This is over. Open it." Now I didn't flinch. "No." Her face flushed red, her voice rising with rage. "You don't get to keep us here like prisoners. This is illegal. You'll regret this. The irony made me laugh, not a loud laugh, but a low, sharp one that echoed across the yard. Illegal. You've got some nerve throwing that word around when you're the ones trespassing. If you really want to test me, go ahead and call the cops. I'll even bring them out here myself. Let's see who regrets it. Her mouth snapped shut again. Rachel placed a hand on her sister's arm, tugging her back. She looked exhausted now, worn down by the weight of the situation. Melissa, stop, she whispered. Then, to me, what do you want? Do you want us to apologize? Fine, I'm sorry. Okay, we shouldn't have come in. We should have asked. Just please, open the gate. It wasn't enough. Not yet. Say it again, I ordered. Rachel blinked, stunned. What? Say it again, I repeated, my voice low but commanding. Louder, so your kids can hear you, so they know exactly what you did and why it was wrong. Her face crumpled with humiliation, but she obeyed. She turned to her children, her voice shaking. We're sorry. We shouldn't have come in without asking. It was wrong. Melissa stiffened, refusing to join in, but Rachel's eyes burned into hers until finally, with a groan of defeat, she added, yeah, we're sorry. Happy now? The children stared at them with wide, confused eyes. One of the older girls frowned. You mean we weren't supposed to come here? She asked, quietly. Rachel's face flushed crimson. No, we weren't. It was a mistake. That moment, watching the mothers forced to confess their wrongdoing in front of their own kids, was the true victory. Not yelling, not slamming doors, just quiet, undeniable truth. They had been exposed for what they were, and there was no escaping it. I let the silence stretch again, watching them squirm, before I finally pushed myself away from the railing. I walked slowly, deliberately, down the deck stairs and across the yard. The children shrank back, their mothers tense as I neared the gate. My keys jingled softly as I pulled them from my pocket, the sound carrying more weight than any words. I unlocked the gate with a click and swung it open. But I didn't step aside. Instead, I stood in the doorway, tall and unmoving. You can leave, I said coldly, but understand this: if you ever set foot in my yard again without permission, the police will be the ones escorting you out. Rachel nodded quickly, grabbing her children by the arms, ushering them out without a word. Melissa glared at me one last time, but even her defiance had dulled into something more like shame. She followed her sister out, muttering under her breath but keeping her head low. I closed the gate behind them, locked it again, and exhaled slowly. The backyard was quiet once more, the pool water still rippling with the memory of their intrusion. But now it was mine again, completely mine, and I knew they'd never dare to test me again. The quiet after they left felt almost surreal. My backyard, moments ago filled with noise and chaos, was silent again. The pool water shimmered in the late afternoon sun, disturbed only by the faint ripple of toys drifting aimlessly. Their towels lay abandoned on the chairs, gaudy splashes of color against my neutral deck. I picked one up, dripping wet and smelling of cheap sunscreen, and tossed it into the trash. It felt symbolic, like throwing away the last traces of their arrogance. For a while I simply sat back down on the deck with my iced tea. The silence was satisfying. But deep down I knew the story wasn't over. People like the Karen sisters never admit defeat quietly. They would try to spin it, to make themselves the victims, because that's what entitled people do. I just didn't know how quickly it would spread. By the next morning, I found out I was trimming hedges in the front yard when my neighbor, Mrs. Green, strolled over. She was the type who always had the latest neighborhood gossip before anyone else, and her raised eyebrows told me she already knew something. So, she began, lowering her voice like she was sharing state secrets. I heard you had a little situation yesterday. I smirked. Word travels fast. Melissa and Rachel were out front of their house last night, talking loud, enough for the whole street to hear. According to them, you trapped them and their children in your yard like a psycho. She rolled her eyes, her tone dripping with disbelief. Of course, I figured there was more to the story. They let themselves into my pool without asking, I said flatly. I locked the gate until they understood how wrong that was. Mrs. Green chuckled, shaking her head. Good for you. Honestly, someone needed to put them in their place. They've been pushing boundaries with everyone. She leaned closer. But brace yourself, they're not done. Those two don't like losing face. She was right. By midweek, whispers followed me whenever I walked down the block at the corner store. I overheard Melissa's voice carrying across the aisles as she complained to another neighbor. He locked our kids in. Who does that? What kind of neighbor behaves like that? Her friend mumbled something sympathetic, but when their eyes flicked toward me at the end of the aisle, I saw hesitation. They weren't fully buying it. The story didn't add up when told out loud. That night I took my trash bins to the curb and found Rachel waiting by the sidewalk. Her arms were crossed, her expression a practiced mixture of indignation and false sweetness. We need to talk, she said. I stood there, the bin lid still in my hand. About what? You humiliated us, she hissed. You locked us in like we were criminals, in front of our children. Do you have any idea how that makes us look? The absurdity almost made me laugh. Makes you look. You did that all by yourselves when you walked into my backyard uninvited. She flushed, her jaw tightening. We were trying to do something. Nice for the kids. That's all. And now the whole neighborhood is talking like we're thieves. You could have handled it differently. I let out a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. I handled it exactly as I should have. You crossed a line. I made sure you remembered it. Her eyes narrowed, but I saw the flicker of defeat behind them. She wanted to win the argument, but there was no winning this one. She turned sharply and walked away, muttering something under her breath. The following days were a test of patience. The sisters doubled down on their victim narrative, complaining to anyone who would listen. But cracks began to show. At the block barbecue the next weekend, conversations shifted when I walked by. People who had heard their side wanted mine too. And when I told the truth, calmly and without embellishment, the reaction was almost always the same: raised brows, disbelieving laughs, and comments like, "They really just walked into your yard." Wow, it didn't take long before the tide began to turn. Neighbors who had always tiptoed around the sisters started swapping stories of their own: Rachel borrowing garden tools and never returning them, Melissa letting her dog run loose into other people's yards, the constant stream of complaints about noise or parking. The pool incident wasn't just a one-off. It was the latest entry in a long list of selfish behavior. One evening, as I was locking the gate after taking a swim, my next-door neighbor, Tom, called over the fence. "Heard about what you did," he said with a grin. "Honestly, wish I'd thought of it myself. They've been a pain in my neck for years." I laughed, the tension in my chest easing. "So I'm not the only one, not even close," he replied. "You just finally gave them the smack of reality they needed." That was when I realized something. By standing my ground, I hadn't just defended myself. I had drawn a line for the whole neighborhood. The sisters' power built on intimidation and manipulation was cracking, and everyone could see it. Still, their resentment lingered. A few days later, Melissa drove slowly past my house, her window down, her glare fixed on me as I watered the garden. She didn't say a word, but her expression was full of venom. Rachel avoided eye contact altogether, steering her kids to the other side of the street whenever I was outside. It didn't bother me. If anything, it was a relief. Their avoidance meant my peace was intact. Yet part of me stayed cautious. People like them rarely let grudges go. They'd try again someday, maybe not with the pool, but in some other petty way. And when they did, I'd be ready. That night, sitting on the deck with a cool breeze rustling through the trees, I looked at the pool water glowing under the porch lights. The reflection was calm, serene. It reminded me of why I'd built this sanctuary in the first place: not for them, not for anyone else, but for me. My rules, my space, my peace. And now, after everything, the entire neighborhood knew it too. Summer rolled on, but something in the neighborhood had changed. Ever since the pool incident, the two sisters had gone quiet. Not completely silent. People like them never truly stopped, but their usual loud voices, constant demands, and smug posturing were strangely muted. It was as if the balance of power had shifted, and they didn't know how to act without it. For weeks, I noticed little things. They no longer waved their arms dramatically in the middle of the street while gossiping with whoever would listen. They no longer barked at the mailman about misdelivered letters or scolded teenagers for skateboarding on the sidewalk. When they passed by my house, they hurried along, their kids tugged close, their faces set in stone. The pool, my pool, sat untouched, its water calm and mine alone. Still, I kept my guard up. People like Rachel and Melissa didn't surrender easily. I half expected another stunt, maybe a petty complaint to the homeowners association or a snide remark during a community meeting. But surprisingly, none of that came. Instead, the neighborhood itself seemed to shift against them. It started at small gatherings. At the next HOA meeting, for example, Rachel raised her hand to complain about the noise from a nearby basketball hoop. Normally, people would nod politely even if they disagreed, just to keep the peace. This time, however, silence followed her words. Then Tom, my neighbor, cleared his throat. "Funny you're worried about respect for property, Rachel. Didn't you just take over someone else's pool not too long ago?" The room chuckled softly, and Rachel's face turned red. She dropped the subject and didn't bring it up again. That was the moment I knew their grip on the neighborhood was broken. After that, neighbors grew bolder. Mrs. Green stopped by with cookies one afternoon, chuckling as she handed me the tin. "You did us all a favor," she said. "They've been lording over everyone for years. But after your little lesson, they've finally quieted down." Word spread further than I expected. Even people from the next street over had heard about the pool story as it became known. And, while the sisters tried to spin it in their favor, their narrative never quite stuck. Because at the heart of it, the facts were undeniable. They trespassed, they got caught, and they were humbled. No amount of whining could erase that. Meanwhile, I reclaimed my peace. My weekends returned to their usual rhythm. Mornings with coffee on the deck, afternoons floating in the pool, evenings listening to crickets chirp under the stars. No interruptions, no trespassers, no drama. Just quiet, steady calm. But what struck me most was how different I felt. Before, I had tolerated the sisters' antics from afar. I had rolled my eyes at their gossip, ignored their petty complaints, and tried to keep my head down. I figured it was easier not to get involved. But locking that gate, drawing that hard line had changed something in me. For the first time I realized that peace isn't something you wait for, it's something you protect, and sometimes, protecting it means standing tall, refusing to be walked over, and showing others where the line is. The final test came one humid evening in late August. I was floating lazily in the pool, the water warm from the day's sun, when I heard the familiar creak of the front gate. My body tensed instantly, but when I looked, it wasn't Melissa or Rachel, it was Rachel's daughter, the older one, holding a bike helmet in her hands. She stood awkwardly at the edge of the yard, not daring to cross the line where the grass met the patio. Mr. Miller, she said softly. I swam to the edge and rested my arms on the poolside. Yes, she shuffled her feet, nervous. I just wanted to say sorry for that day. Mom made it sound like it wasn't a big deal, but I knew it was wrong. I didn't like how it felt. I won't come in again. Her words hit me harder than I expected. She was just a kid, caught between her mother's arrogance and her own sense of right and wrong. For her to come here, on her own, to apologize, it said more than any excuse her mother could give. Thank you, I said, genuinely. That means a lot. And you're always welcome to stop by if you ask first. She smiled faintly, nodded, and hurried off with her bike. I leaned back into the water, watching the ripples stretch across the pool. That was the moment I knew the story had truly ended. The sisters might never admit their fault, but the next generation had already seen through it. The lesson had landed where it mattered most. From then on, life in the neighborhood was different. Not perfect, of course, no neighborhood ever is, but quieter, fairer. The Karen sisters still existed, still whispered and glared, but their reign of entitlement was gone. They had been humbled, and everyone knew it. And as for me, I found peace again in the place I had built for myself. Every time I walked to that gate and locked it, the metallic click wasn't just security, it was a reminder that respect, once reclaimed, should never be surrendered again. The pool sparkled under the setting sun, its waters calm and undisturbed. It was mine, always mine, and this time no one dared to forget it.